responsibility, and free will. Free will, however, was introduced into the picture for very definite reasons. Since it is so at variance with basic Christian doctrines, there must have been exceptionally strong inducements for taking refuge in it. These are the necessity of maintaining human responsibility for sin and of preserving the righteousness of God. The Arminian may be willing to admit that his view faces difficulties, but, he asks, can the Calvinist offer a better escape? It is all well and good to show the conflict between omnipotent creation and free will, but what about the conflict between determinism and morality? Is it not better to take a strong stand for morality and responsibility, even if we degrade God to a finite level, than to defend omnipotence so as to undermine human morality and divine holiness? In other words, since God cannot be both omnipotent and good, is it not better to admit a finite God? Perhaps one quotation may be allowed to document the dependence of free will on the motive of responsibility. But before that is done, let it be noted that there is no other motive. Could it be shown that man's responsibility does not presuppose free will, theology would be freed from all this confusion. No longer would one be required to hold half-heartedly to one set of self-contradictory doctrines rather than to a second set of equally contradictory doctrines. Nor would one be compelled to disguise the obvious contradictions by the false piety of calling them mysteries. The remainder of the argument will attempt to show that neither human responsibility nor divine holiness requires free will. But first, the quotation just alluded to from Jonathan Edwards' Miscellaneous Observations, Part 2, Chapter 3, page 384. Quote, "Throughout the whole history of philosophy and theology, people have wrangled over the question of free will. In general, the idealistic philosophies have asserted that the human spirit must be in some sense free, while materialistic philosophies have denied this freedom. Theology has clung tenaciously to the belief that man is a free moral agent, while at the same time often asserting a doctrine of predestination which, taken at its face value, would rigidly circumscribe man's acts. The problem, though complex, is too fundamental to be dodged. We have seen that the possibility of moral or immoral action depends on the power of choice. If all one's acts are set and predetermined, either by the structure of the material world or by the will of God, in such a fashion that it is impossible to act other than one does, quite obviously freedom disappears. With the power of voluntary choice goes moral responsibility. One cannot consciously choose to be good, nor choose to seek after God unless he has the power to choose not to do so. No moral quality attaches to my failure to steal the $1 million that is outside my reach, but stealing becomes a moral question with me when I have to decide whether to tell the store clerk he has given me too much change. Likewise, if I am foreordained to be saved or damned, there is not much use of my doing anything about my fate. If I have no freedom, I am not responsible for my acts. Theological determinism, or predestination, is a cardinal doctrine of Islam. Islam means submission to the will of Allah, and a Muslim is one who submits to the fatalistic decrees of an arbitrary deity. Christian theology in its earlier forms regarded God as equally peremptory, though more ethical in his degrees. Through the influence of illustrious Christian theologians, notably Paul, Augustine, and Calvin, The doctrine of predestination has profoundly influenced Christian thinking. While God's omnipotence has thus been emphasized, God's freedom has been exalted at the expense of man's, and the most inhuman acts have been glossed over as arising from the will of God. But happily, the doctrine of predestination is disappearing, at least in its application to evils that are obviously preventable. Some still hold that when the typhoid victim dies from lack of proper sanitation, it happened because it was to be. There is a good deal of illogical comfort in such a view, but not many, even of the most rigorous of Calvinists, would now say that if a man gets drunk and shoots his family, it is the will of God that he should do so.